Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this week's edition of Sisters Corner, the topical show where we talk about issues that are of relevance to Muslim women, all women, and actually any decent human being. This week we're very fortunate to be joined by Jenny Ramsden from the Touchstone Project, and actually we're going to talk about some really relevant issues in terms of understanding, tolerance, acceptance of love for difference and people who aren't the same as us. And before we go any further, I'd just like to say, our feelings, our prayers, our thoughts are with the victims from the Westminster terror attacks actually last week. And part of our show, we will touch on what we needed to do and what our families and individuals can do about making, this world a better place for everyone. So, without further ado, welcome, Jenny.
Thank you, Amria, and thank you very much for asking me to come on your show today.
Oh, absolute pleasure. I'm so glad you could come because I've been wanting you to come for a while because you're doing some amazing things in Bradford.
Thank you, as are you.
Oh, bless you, thank you. So before we go any further, would you just tell us a little bit about, yourself and the organisation you work with?
Yeah, sure. So I've got two roles actually. So I'm a priest in the Church of England, in two churches near Keighley, and also I'm an interfaith worker for Touchstone, which is part of the Methodist Church. And there my role is to bring together women, mainly women. We do work with men, but largely I get together women from around Bradford of different faiths in various creative ways to form friendships and to increase understanding and then to try and transform the community in which we live for the better.
Fantastic, and I've actually witnessed some of this amazing work that Jenny does. So if anyone does want to get in touch, we'll repeat it at the end, but what's the best way to get in touch with you?
We have got a Facebook page at Touchstone and we're on Twitter, so they're probably the best ways. You can send us a message on either of those and we can let you know what we're up to.
And you have a website as well?
We have a website as well. It does need a bit of updating, so if you want to know what's happening kind of day to day, you're best looking at Facebook and Twitter. But if you want to have a look overall at what we're up to, then the website is a good place to start.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Jenny, if you don't mind, you're a priest.
Yeah.
Now, despite what we think, that's still quite rare, in the sort of Christian clergy. What brought you to an official role in Christianity?
It kind of is a long story, really, so I won't tell you the whole story. I think anyone who's kind of had a vocation will know that it's quite difficult to put into words, really, but it's been kind of a lifelong sense that that would be where I would end up. Actually, women have only been able to be priests in the Anglican Church, which is where I'm a priest for about 20 years, and I can remember the day that they voted in the church and said women could become priests, and I just had this sense of thinking, oh, that's good, because that's what I'm going to end up doing. That's what I feel I'm going to end up doing. So I did a theology degree. I looked into becoming a priest when I first got married, but decided actually I'd rather concentrate on my marriage and on my children. But then when my daughter started school, when she was about 5, I felt God saying again, this is now the time for you to start exploring going into the priesthood. It's quite a long process. You have to go and see another priest. You have really for a year or 18 months various interviews and talks where they kind of discern your vocation and ask whether you're suitable. Then you have to go and do 2 or 3 years at a theological college, which I did too, and then you become a curate, and I'm in my 3rd year of curacy now.
Right, excellent. So it is a vocation, because and you do it, I suppose, for the love of God and for
love of God and love of neighbour, I would say, are the two big teachings in Christianity. So that's why, really.
Oh, excellent. So I'm so chuffed to have you here, actually, and I think it's fascinating. I could listen to you for a long time, which I will get a chance to do. Yes, we will get a chance to do. So, what then brought you to? I know you're a priest at a church, but then you're also doing this interfaith work. What brought you to interfaith work?
Well, I think it's the bit I said about loving your neighbour. So, the Bible, our holy text, tells us really clearly that there are 2 main commandments. People think 10, but at some point there are 10. But in the New Testament, Jesus is asked if you had to pick 2, which are the most important 2. And he says, love God and love your neighbour as yourself. So for me, interfaith work is all about expressing loving my neighbour as myself. In Bradford and Keighley, where I'm a priest, my neighbours are literally people from different faiths, and it isn't good enough for me as a Christian to not love those people. So I just feel really called to kind of actively engage with people of different faiths. The other big Bible verse that is influential to me is, blessed are the peacemakers. And I just really have come to believe that we're never going to have peace actually internationally, locally, without understanding each other, including and most especially actually our neighbours of different faiths. So.
And that's lovely actually, that concept of neighbourliness and being neighbourly to, and it doesn't literally mean the neighbour next door,
No.
it is the people who occupy this planet with you actually in its broadest sense. That sort of brotherhood or sisterhood, you know, it does exist in all cultures in some way or other, and in all religions, and certainly it's quite an Islamic concept as well, is to, you know, want for your neighbour, you know, you haven't loved your neighbour unless you want for him what you want for yourself, and you know, those kind of concepts there, and they're quite powerful, but they don't always just happen these days, do they?
No.
You know, I don't know what you feel about that.
Yeah, it's difficult. On the one hand, I see quite a lot of division and fear, nationally and on the news and internationally. I have to say in Bradford I do see a huge number of people working to overcome that, not just Touchstone where I work, but people like you. I could name, you know, lots and lots of people that I come across daily actually who do actively try and love their neighbour, but there's always more to be done.
Yeah, and I suppose the reason I was saying that is we're becoming more insular as society as well, you know, so it's more about the nuclear family. It's things pushing us in somewhere. There are exceptions, like you say. So it's more about the nuclear family technology instead of broadening our horizon.
Yeah, definitely,
You know, people are more attached to their phone and their mobile, and, you know, their connections are, I suppose you could call them neighbours, but they might be at the other end of the world. It's not someone you'd see necessarily very often. So that's what I'm just saying. And then we're always busy.
Yeah.
You know,
really busy. I'm guilty of that, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So people are always rushing around, and I know I met my neighbour who's just moved in next door from one house away, and he was surprised I'd been living there that long. Although I talked to his dad quite regularly, so it was quite interesting. That concept of, and then I had to explain, well, I leave quite early and I don't come home until quite, and I felt really bad because I thought I'm just explaining to my neighbour, who at the very least should have known my face, I thought, you know, even if not much else. So it felt quite poor. So we're not preaching to anybody actually, it's just saying I would recognise it's quite difficult, but actually in my own experience just on my street it's so much easier to, if you do know your neighbours and you can say hello, and that's very practically, you know, and I'm talking about your neighbour next door, but we all have a responsibility for this earth that we inhabit, and for the people in it, because they are essentially, we should feel they're like our family.
Definitely.
And that's quite a concept, like I said, in, you know, all major faiths, in all cultures actually, generally.
I think
generally
it is,
speaking. So, given that we've got some challenges about creating friendships or supporting the development of friendships, because you can't force friendships, can you? Why do you think we need this sort of thing called interfaith work? What is it first? And then I know you said a little bit at the beginning, and then we'll talk a bit about why we need it.
So interfaith work, I guess, is trying to create a space where people from different faiths can come together. The work at Touchstone we try and do that in quite a creative way. So we have done things like a weaving project called Weaving Women's Wisdom, which I can talk about in more detail later if you like. We have got something which is led by a friend of ours called Uzma, which is called the Square Chapati Club.
Oh, we had Uzma here talking all about Square Chapati.
So the Square Chapati Club is another creative way of getting people together. There are more formal ways of doing it. So last week I was on a discussion panel with a female rabbi and a female Muslim scholar, and there we were talking about women in our religious texts. You can celebrate festivals together. I've been on the Vaisakhi parade, the Sikh parade that's coming up again soon. I've done broken fast with Muslim women.
I think that's
Ramadan.
where we first met, when you were still training as a priest. I think that's when a couple of years ago now, I think it was, wasn't it?
At the iftar, the interfaith iftar. So I think there's lots of different ways of doing it. I think there's an informal way, which is just living in amongst your neighbours and making sure that you say hello and chatting. And then there are more formal gatherings, I guess, and they take all sorts of different forms.
So what mindset do you think people who get involved in interfaith work need to have or be willing to develop?
Just to be open when you go in. I think it's all right to be a bit worried. So we have had people come along and say that they're worried that they're going to put their foot in it, or say the wrong thing, or come across as ignorant maybe, but we always say that doesn't matter. Just come as yourself, be willing to engage with somebody else and listen to what they have to say to you. That's all you need. You don't need any special skills, or you don't even need any knowledge of any other faith, just a willingness to be in the same room as somebody who's got a different faith to you. Yeah.
And I mean, we'll talk more about this later, but I've been in some of those spaces, and they're really powerful, actually.
Yeah, really powerful.
And I go away feeling better about myself, my faith, my understanding. So it's not, interfaith work isn't about convincing people different that another religion is the better one, or what. It's actually just saying, well, you know, what makes us human, and how do we connect together? And like I said, I find those spaces quite healing in a way as well, you know, because they're quite powerful. The people of faith saying, okay, I've got one, but you know, you matter just as much, etc. They're quite powerful.
Definitely, and it's really important what you've said, that it isn't either about trying to convert each other, but nor is it about watering down your own faith. So I have had other Christians sometimes say, oh, you know, do you have to sort of pretend that you don't believe certain things to get involved in interfaith work? And I would always say, absolutely not. It's not about watering down what you believe. It's about being honest about what you believe, but really respecting what somebody else believes too, and being, like you said, willing to learn from them and to think about more what you've got in common than what divides you, but not completely ignoring that there is a difference too.
And do you know what? I think I'm quite curious naturally, and I love being around people and learning their stories, and so I find it a little bit surprising when I think, how can people be so closed off? But they can. So, and for example, it's Lent at the moment, isn't it? And I got talking to a colleague who's from an Eastern European background. She's been in the country for I think she came as a child a long time ago. All her children are grown up and, you know, fled the nest kind of thing now. But sort of orthodox way of, you know, celebrating Lent, so, you know, very much a vegan diet and all, and I didn't know, so you know, we just got, I don't know what got us talking, something about eggs, I think, and the importance of, or something along those lines, and then we got talking about Easter, you know, the way your mind works, it just takes you funny places. And then and I was offering her a chocolate or something, and I said, oh, so you've given up chocolate for Lent? And then she said, no, I've given up pretty much everything for Lent. You know, so it's a vegan diet that they go on, and I just thought, how interesting, because I did not know. And then we were talking about the egg, you know, and the symbolism of that, which, well, exactly that. In their culture, in the way they practice their faith, they would have a boiled egg on the first day of after Lent, and that's how they would open their fast, if that made sense. And but now obviously it's become a chocolate egg, and you know, whatever else, and however people do it. But I just thought it was fascinating. I mean, this was in amongst our day job, so I could have stopped and chat. But what was interesting is the person she sits next to. I went, oh, I was just having a fascinating conversation with her, and and I said, oh, she's doing Lent, is she? But then, so they were sat next to each other. I don't sit there. But that's, you know, not translated. So I think being open to things, you just learn. Like I said, it makes you feel stronger, and I won't say wiser, because I don't understand it all. But it just, you know, you just feel like you connect a bit more. So I'm thinking, if I remember, I'm going to buy a chocolate egg at the end of Lent. You know, just because now I know a bit more. You just feel a bit more connected, don't you?
And it can help you with your own faith, like you've said, learning about another faith. So. In Christianity, we do have set prayer times, so it would be quite usual to have like a morning prayer and an evening prayer, and some people would have a midday prayer, but it isn't as set as it is in the Islamic faith. And as a result, a lot of Christians probably wouldn't do morning and evening prayer. It's much more free. You know, the idea is you can pray whenever you like, but the risk is, and it was definitely happened to me, is that actually as a result, you kind of don't. Because you just think, oh, well, I can pray later, I don't have to do it now. So it was talking to my Muslim friends, and especially a colleague that I used to work with who used to go and pray 5 times a day. So we would be working and she'd get up to go and pray. And it used to make me think, do you know, I wish that we had that. I wish that I did that, because it's good to turn to God throughout the day and just thank him for what you've got and think about your faith. And so actually, as a result of watching my Muslim friends pray 5 times a day, I started up the practice of morning and evening prayer, which has been really good for me. So yeah, I think you can look at each other's traditions and think, well, that would be helpful for me too.
And I actually think possibly, you know, on a global scale, some of this sort of interfaith work when we grew up with sort of fire and brimstone approach.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, you will do this, otherwise you will go to hell. And it's kind of scary if you're a child.
Yeah.
But actually, as I've been watching and the way things are developing, there's a lot in Islam and the way it's taught now, much more. There's more on sort of tolerance, there's more on, you know, be kind to others and to yourself, you know. God isn't actually full of wrath, but he's actually full of love and appreciation, and, you know, so it's a kind of gentler thing as well. And I think that's quite powerful, and I think some of that has come from, you know, because we know in all religions you have some people who are at the more fundamental end, you know, and then even worse at the extreme end, and then you've got people, you know, on the spectrum towards moderate and then towards, you know, quite what's the word? Liberal, that's the word, yes. So we've got liberal. And you know, there's room for everyone. At the end of the day, it's not our place to judge how people, you know, live their lives and how people connect with their God. But I think some of that has come from, you know, and I remember as a teenager thinking, and I used to connect to God, and this thing about prayer is interesting, because we 5 times a day, but then there was a thing about going, well, what if I want to talk rest of the time? And actually, so I used to spend quite a bit of time sat in my bed going, you know, God, and it's like this, it's like that as a teenager. It got me through my teenage years, if I'm honest. But so if I'd felt like, oh my God, I'm sinning because I'm not doing it in that structure. So it's that kind of thing, that communion, that kind of, you know, relationship is ongoing all day, every day. It's really interesting to hear you say that. And that's what I was saying about, if you don't talk to people and you don't inquire, you do kind of cut off a little bit from opportunities, don't you? So that's fascinating, actually. So did we touch on why we need interfaith work in this day and age? We talked a bit about being busy and all of that, but you know, what are we trying to address when we say?
Well, I guess it's that fear that you do see. We at Touchstone, we did a survey of local women in our community. This was a couple of years ago. We did it, and we asked, well, lots of things, but one of the questions we asked was about their hopes and fears. And 98% of the people who responded said they were fearful of either physical or verbal attack from somebody not of their own faith or culture, and that had increased dramatically in the past few years. And I do still think that a lot of that fear is because people don't know each other and or haven't met, and if you haven't met somebody or talked to them, then you don't understand them. And I genuinely think that just chatting to somebody, becoming friends with them, understanding a bit more about what they're about, just dispels fear in a way that nothing else can. You know, if you only ever watch the media, you are going to have one view of something, but then if you chat to somebody of that faith, very quickly what the media tells you is dispelled.
Yeah, and I think people realise very quickly, actually, we all worry about the same things.
Absolutely.
You know, you might wear a headscarf, but you might still be worried about whether you're too big, too small, too thin, too fat, you know, whether you'll be worried about your child's health, your mother-in-law's relationship with your mother-in-law, good, bad, indifferent. You know, it's kind of similar, the issues when it comes down to it.
And this is the thing that comes up time and time again in our work. So when I mentioned a weaving project that we did, and my colleague Ruth and I facilitated conversation with the women as part of that, and one of the questions we asked was, which women have been influential in your life? And people opened up so much, but as you said, that just brought out that we all have things in common. So we all talked about our mothers and the influence they'd had, or grandmas or sisters or friends. People shared really glorious stories, but also really sad stories about things that had happened to them, about women that they'd loved and lost. And it just makes you realise that there are things that transcend faith. So we all worry about our kids, we all worry about our parents getting older, we all worry about what we're going to get for tea, you know, all sorts of things just completely transcend our faith. Our faith, really.
One of the things I found quite fascinating, and this wasn't interfaith work, it was a team of people I used to manage, and they were all women from different backgrounds. And I remember one day making a sweeping statement, and I was talking about my husband, who I hope isn't watching, and basically I was saying, but this was after, you know, we were just sort of settling up in our own home and working out where we fit and how things are going to work, and I remember saying, oh, you don't understand though, it's not like that, you know, in our culture, in Asian culture, it's like this. And they sort of stopped me and just said, Anne-Maria, it's not Asian men, it's nearly all men. It's a job and a half to get most men doing housework. It's a job and a half, you know, and they were generalised, but these were the women there who were all saying actually, you know, from different backgrounds, you know, born and raised here, came from, you know, the Caribbean, etc. So and they're all just saying it's not just Asian men, and that was quite powerful for me actually, because I was looking at it as a cultural thing, as opposed to a gender thing, and that was quite enlightening, because then I went, oh, okay, well I can work with a bit more like that, because it's then, I don't know why, but it was just quite enlightening, because it just broadened things up. And then actually when we've talked about gender roles and stuff, and I've talked to my other half, and you know, we've talked about scripture, if you know, and we've talked about the Prophet's example, and you can't just pick and choose, you know, the bits that you like. It's all or kind of nothing really, and it's been really interesting. But a key part of that stimulus was this realisation suddenly, oh, we're talking about division of labour actually in the home, essentially. It's not even per se about gender, it's just the way things have taken as a society, but also got me questioning this sort of sweeping statements I was making about, because it isn't, you know, all I've got a cousin who's more than happy to chip in and do anything and everything, and prefers to do the cooking.
I'm lucky, I have to say, with my husband actually. He's very, very good around the house. But
well, exactly, and it's just recognising it's horses for coursing and different relationships.
Absolutely,
but had I not voiced my concern, then I wouldn't have had that sort of penny, you know, that light bulb moment. That was just like, okay, and because then once you understand what the fear is, you can actually start working on it. So I think that's, speaking of fear, I think that's quite powerful, that the research that you've done, because there's been, possibly since, you know, 9/11 and the attacks in America, there's been an increase in Islamophobia, and women and Sikh men, strangely,
I've read about that too.
Very visible, you know, and obviously a lot of Muslim men are visible as well, you know, depending on their attire, but because of the turban, Sikh men and the beard very much, you know, so do tend to be the focus of physical attacks. So there is a concern, and I remember my sister-in-law's got family in America, and around that time there was huge anxiety, and still is actually, about whether you wear the hijab or you don't wear the hijab, and you know, preservation of life is paramount, so no, you don't have to, yes you do, you know, all of that, and that level of anxiety would make it very hard for people to interact. And most sane people won't believe everything they hear, but unfortunately in the media, if you're getting drip, because it's just constant, isn't it? There's a constant barrage of, you know, it's for Muslim women, you know, you're oppressed, you're victims, you're this, you're that, you're colluding with your oppressors as well if you think women should be a certain way, but then you also get the sort of everyone's a terrorist and all of that kind of stuff, so it's really hard to unpick. So therefore, if you've got this image building up of fear, that the media is building up, then how do you break that and go, actually, I will extend the hand of friendship. I will just go and see if this woman wants to talk or is happy to say good morning, and it can be quite challenging.
It can be, but I think people sometimes build it up to be more challenging than it has to be. So we had some Muslim neighbours move onto our street, and just something really simple, when it was Eid, I just put a card through the door. So it's not, I think people build up this fear, and actually it's quite easy to break it down. It's just taking that first step, really.
And I found that exact same experience on our street. We exchange Christmas cards, so our neighbour will drop one through ours and I'll take her a box of biscuits, and you know, similarly my sister lives in, she is a minority in the village that she lives in, and she'll take all her neighbours some, you know, biscuits or chocolates for Christmas.
Really nice.
And equally, you know, some of the older neighbours kind of see their children as their grandchildren, so they will bring them Easter eggs at, you know, Easter, and it's quite sweet. So it doesn't have to be. But one thing there, I think, is neither of them feel they're compromising on their faith or their religion. You know, so actually helping your neighbour celebrate something that's important to them doesn't make me less of a Muslim, you know, in my opinion, and certainly doesn't feel like this is Mary I'm talking about in Hertfordshire. She definitely doesn't feel any less Catholic because she's, you know, sharing these with these Muslim children, you know, and it's lovely. Like, and I think one of the sweetest things, we were going to a wedding recently, and my niece was all dressed up, and Mary loves seeing her all dressed up. So she, before we set off, she had to go and see her honorary grandmum to show her beautiful dress, and then we could go drive on. It was quite funny actually, and I was like, so we're stopping to show her dress. can't we send her a picture? No, she wants to see her. I said, okay,
Yeah.
fine, I will stop and she
Yeah.
can say hello and we'll
Yeah.
carry on. So it's just small things, and you know
It
what,
is,
we're
yeah.
going to go to a break in a couple of seconds.
Yep.
So I think when we come back, if we can have a bit of a chat about how people can just, you know, do a little bit more in their own tiny world,
Yeah.
and some of the projects that you're working on
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
moment
sure.
and have worked on,
Yeah.
actually.
Fabulous.
So inshallah, see you on the other side of this break.